Okay, this video is another engineer task. This is actually a subtask of the class that I used to teach on booby trap emplacement and removal. That class was literally a full day class. Would start in the morning and we didn't finish till final formation for the day. The final block of instruction for that class was the students went through and placed booby traps. Then they went through and removed the other group's traps. Now this particular task that we're going to talk about is neutralizing tripwire activated booby traps. Now officially the guidance from the U.S. Army Engineer Center is to always destroy the booby traps where they are located, unless the activation or destruction of that trap will cause unacceptable civilian casualties or unacceptable destruction to infrastructure and materials. Example, let's say there's a booby trap that is inside an apartment building. You know, there's civilians in there, we cannot get out. If we destroy the trap, those civilians will be injured or killed. That is unacceptable. That trap must be removed, must be deactivated. Another example for when it comes to structures and materials, let's say that the booby trap is connected to a 10,000 gallon gasoline storage tank. An activation or destruction of that trap will cause the destruction of that fuel tank, causing a massive explosion. That is unacceptable. That trap must be deactivated, neutralized, removed. Or another example, structures. Let's say that booby trap is connected to a large amount of ordnance inside a hospital, and if we destroy that trap, it destroys the hospital. That is unacceptable. So you need to understand how to neutralize a booby trap. It could also be you are out in the field on patrol and you're moving through enemy territory, you come across one of their booby traps, you need to remove it so that no other friendly forces will set it off, but you do not want to activate it yourself, giving away your position. Now there are two types of traps or modes of activation when it comes to tripwires. The first one is pull. Pull typically is with a loose wire. There'll be some slack in it. And how you neutralize that? You cut the tripwire, thus neutralizing the trap. Now how pull works, I have an M60 fuse igniter here which will not work as a firing device for a booby trap. We have tripwire attached to the pull ring here. Our target comes through, hits that tripwire, pulls the tripwire pulls on the pull ring, activating the trap. That pull either causes part of the striker in here to shoot forward, setting off a detonator, or if it's a pull type igniter, you know, it's pulling out, it starts the firing chain then. Neutralize pull type devices by cutting the tripwire. The other type, which is far more dangerous, is tension release. How you tell a tension release from a pull? The tripwire is going to be taut. It is going to be tight. There will be absolutely no slack in it. How tension release works, once again to our simulated firing device here. Tripwire is attached to the pull ring. The target comes through, breaks the tripwire. When that happens, the spring inside here drives the striker forward, setting off the percussion cap, starting the firing chain, detonating the booby trap. Officially, under U.S. military doctrine, you never, ever, ever, ever try to neutralize a tension release booby trap. But it can be done depending on the particular firing device that is being employed. If it is the old M1 series tension release trap, that one there's no real way to deactivate that because it has a ratchet system in there to pull out the tension in the tripwire. And as you are ratcheting the tripwire, it is pulling the striker, the plunger, out. And as it's pulling that plunger out of the main body of the firing device, it is pulling the shaft, this part here that's connected to the striker, it's pulling that out of the location where the safety pin would go in to disarm it. And the only way you could ever get that hole lined up with the body so that you could put that safety pin back in is you'd have to start to unratchet it going back, but that's too dangerous because you run the risk of just plain activating the device. Some other examples here of more common items that you will see in guerrilla warfare. For a pull type device, a good example is the clothespin. With the clothespin, this is going to be used with electric initiation. It's going to be used with electric blasting caps and a battery. You have the leads tied off on one side of the pin, leads tied off on the other side. When the two come together, it completes the circuit, allowing the charge to go through, setting off the electric blasting cap, setting off the booby trap. The reason this is a pull type device, you have a separate piece of material in here that is non-conductive that separates the two jaws. The target would come through, hit the tripwire, remove that non-conductive material, allowing the jaws to close. So you have a pulling action to activate the device. Another means is probably one of the most multi-purpose devices you will ever see in guerrilla warfare is a mousetrap. This one is a good example, the way I'm going to show you now, for tension release. There will be an electric lead attached to the spring and bar here. Another electric lead will be tied around the board itself. Tripwire goes across the trail. Now, when the target comes through, breaks the tripwire, it snaps closed, bringing the two contacts together, allowing the charge to go through, setting off the electric blasting cap, detonating the booby trap. Tripwires typically, at least in the US, you're going to find tripwire like this. You're going to have two spools that are yellow, which I think is meant for in sand or fall conditions when grass is browning out, and two spools of green, meant to be used in green grass, summertime, spring, and so forth. It's getting a lot harder to find. It's not as cheap as it used to be, but it's still out there. Now, the first thing for the battle drill for neutralizing the booby trap is obviously identify it. You come across a tripwire. So you need to first off mark it. Or call someone forward to mark it and neutralize it. One of the best means that I found for marking a tripwire that it's there is just your orange Hunter's Trail marking tape. Break off about a 1 foot to 1.5 foot piece of this. It's really lightweight. You can drape it over the top of the tripwire to show people, hey, there's a tripwire here. Do not move ahead until you're told to. So we've identified and we've now marked our tripwire. Now we got to go into removal. A note on this, only one person should ever be up on the booby trap for neutralizing it or removing it. Only one person at a time. That way, if something goes seriously wrong, only one person's injured. Everyone else needs to back up. How far should they back off? It depends on the ordnance that's there. I would say at a minimum, go back 25 meters. And if you're at the 25 meters, get down in a prone or get behind something that will give you cover. If you find out that booby trap is connected to a larger piece of ordnance, like an artillery shell or an aerial drop bomb, you're going to have to back off even more, potentially hundreds of meters. Now, the person that is up there on the booby trap needs to call off, needs to inform the people behind him what he's doing. So that way they know, or at least have an idea what may have been screwed up if it goes off. So that they get that intel that can be passed off to higher so that it can be disseminated out to other engineers so that they're aware that, hey, this didn't work, maybe you should try something else. And as was the procedure in Iraq, you come across an IED, take pictures of it, and send that up with the intel after it's removed and disabled. Now, when you come up to the booby trap, you got it marked. One person's up there doing the trap. Always check both ends before cutting any tripwires. Always. Because there's always the possibility you're going to have two different devices on that tripwire. Also, while you are checking both ends, always look for other traps or mines. There is always the possibility that you could have that tripwire there, and within a foot to 1.5 feet on either side of that trap, there could be a pressure type activated mine there. Or up around the trap itself, within a foot to 1.5 feet radius, there could be a mine. So never place your foot directly next to that tripwire, within a foot of it, on either side, and never put your foot within 12 to 18 inches of the booby trap itself. So you're going to want to lean forward a little bit while you're doing the deactivation. So now I'm going to go through. I have some craptacular examples that I put together here. We're going to go through on how this stuff could be taken care of. These are not the best little examples in the world. They're not as good as what I like to do them. These are just what I threw together for this training. So I don't want any stupid comments about, hey, that's really amateurish. Okay, we're coming along. We're walking down a trail. We see a tripwire, or we feel it on our legs. Stop. Do not advance any further. Call an engineer forward if you're not an engineer. Point out what you see. They will move forward, stay that distance back, and they'll feel that tripwire that, yeah, there's something there. If they had the marking tape, drape it over, marking where the tripwire is, so that someone can see. They will then move to whichever end is closest to them. It's just easier that way. And they will check where that tripwire goes to. May have to move some bushes, may have to move some debris. Depends on if you're in an urban setting or if you're out in the forest. We cleared away some brush. We found an M67 fragmentation grenade inside a soup can attached to a stake hidden in a bush. Now, you may think, oh, this is real simple. We got a pull type device, because how this works, the tripwire gets pulled, pulls the grenade out of the can, the grenade goes off. What should you always do at this point? You've identified one device, check the other end. Because there's always the possibility that on that other end, you may have a mousetrap or some other type of tension release device attached to that tripwire. And when you cut that tripwire, it'll activate the trap on the other side. Now I'm sure someone will say, well, that mousetrap will just pull that grenade right out of the can. Well, if they made sure that that grenade is nice and snug in here, has a nice tight little fit right here at the end, maybe crushed it a little bit, so that grenade's not going to come out easily, except with a good pull on the tripwire, it can be done. And remember, as you're checking, be careful, because there's always a possibility somewhere around each end or on either side of the tripwire there could be a mine or some other type of pressure activated booby trap. But in this situation, we found nothing on the other end, so we need to neutralize this grenade before we mess with the tripwire. If you have a pin for that type of grenade, that model of grenade, slip it in there to safe that safety lever. If you don't, another option is having a piece of wire that is the correct size. Trial and error, that's all I can say for finding out what type of wire. Put it through where the safety pin was. U-shape it so it's not going to come out. Then go through, cut the tripwire, and remove it from the can. And then make sure to destroy the can. Take it with you, crush it, whatever. Still bring it with you. Don't leave anything behind that the enemy can reuse. That's an example of a pull type device. How common is it to see multiple traps like that together? Very. In Yugoslavia, it was very common that the sides there would take 2 mortar shells, put pull type booby trap devices into the fuse well on both mortar shells. They would fasten them to either side of the trail, and then as the enemy would come through there, they would hit the tripwire if they didn't notice it, pulled off both devices on both mortar shells, and they would get hit from both sides. Vietnam, it was very common for the VC, especially, to use multiple devices at every booby trap site. Now our next little example here, we found a tripwire. We traced it back to a tree. Here it ran into an eyelet of some type. Tripwire went down to a pull type device connected into a claymore mine. In this situation, first off, neutralize or safe the device if possible. So once again, you're going to have a hole through the fuse body. You're going to try to put a piece of wire through there to safe it before you go through and cut the wire. There is a video that, if I can find it, I will put in the description. Out of Ukraine, of an engineer team going through clearing booby traps. One of the booby traps was a MON 50 with a pull type device in it. They went through and neutralized it. Watch that, they do it correctly. Similar type setup, except using Russian type stuff. Now, next one I have here, I've now done 2 pulls. Next one should be pretty obvious, isn't it? The type that we're going to have. Okay, our next one is going to be a tension release. So we find a taunt tripwire. How are we going to take care of this? If possible, first off, safe the device. Get that piece of wire or the safety pin or clip into there, safing it. Then, if possible, remove it from the charge before cutting the tripwire, just in case. Now, if the firing device has exposed deck cord going to the charge, especially with the tension release, disconnect that deck cord from the device. Crimpers. Get it in there. Cut it as close to the firing device as possible. Separating it and remove the charge. Being careful not to be too close, lifting it away. Remove the charge from the device before deactivating the device. Now at this point, if you got the charge out of the way, even if you're in a situation where the device going off could cause structural damage or civilian casualties, now all you got to worry about here is the blast from the blasting cap and the deck cord. So at this point you really could go through, toss out that grappling hook, tug on the tripwire and break it, setting this off. As long as it's not going to, say, ignite fumes from, say, fuel storage. Assess your situation before you would go through. You know, if setting that device off could set fire to fumes or cause a fire and still cause damage, then still trying to figure out a way to neutralize that before cutting the tripwire. Now, is a tension release device always going to be attached with tripwire to the ordnance? No. Tension release device can be screwed directly into the ordnance. We could have, instead of deck cord attached to this, this could be screwed into a destructor. I'd have to show you pictures of it. It's a multi-purpose type thing designed for screwing into different types of U.S. ordnance. And we could have this attached into, say, a 155 millimeter artillery shell. Well, if that's the case, you're going to have to be real damn careful with safing this and removing it. When you're going through neutralizing any booby trap, your number one friends are always going to be your marking tape or marking materials. You can use white engineer tape. You can use flags, pieces of cardboard that say booby trap that you set down, you know, so many feet in front of the trap, whatever the SOP is for the unit. Crimpers, so that you can cut deck cord as you come across it. And then also on here, you got the screwdriver for if you need that. Another thing I recommend, diagonal pliers. The Viet Cong booby traps video from Vietnam said to use alignments. I've personally found this little baby works a hell of a lot better for deactivating electrical wires, because with this, I got a narrower point on the end. I can get in there. I can cut one side of the electrical wire, switch it over, do the other side without it making a circuit on the wire as I'm cutting it, like can potentially happen with alignments. So just a simple pair of diagonal pliers in a pouch or down in the webbing on your body armor, highly recommended. Just checking over my materials here, seeing if there's anything else. Another thing that could come in handy, obviously, bits of wire of different sizes for use on different devices. What size of wires? It's going to go by trial and error. If you can have a pocket full of different types of safety pins and clips for the different types of booby trap devices, definitely a must-have. Another thing that could come in handy is zip ties. Someone laughed at this as an option. It does work for immobilizing some of the pull rings and stuff like that on a booby trap. depending on how it's set up. Like I said, I will try to track down that video out of Ukraine of the engineers clearing booby traps so that you can see a way for neutralizing the real thing in the field. The way this engineer does it, or this soldier does it, he is doing it the right way. I think he gets a little bit too close at times to the trap, but other than that, he did a really good job. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, essayons.